Hey guys, we are going to work on some polynomial inequalities today, okay? So a lot of times when we're solving things, it's an equal sign, right? And we're looking for x equals something, right? But now we have an inequality, so we're actually going to have a range of answers, okay? So let's go ahead and look at how we work on this, okay? So first thing I want to do is to get everything on one side, okay? So I'm going to subtract the x from both sides so that everything's on this side. I'm just left with a 0 on the right side, okay? So when I subtract that x off, I end up with x squared minus x minus 6 is greater than or equal to 0, okay? Next thing I'm going to do is factor this, okay? If you need a review on factoring, I'll link a video in the corner. But when I factor this, I think what two numbers multiply to -6, right? And add to -1, which it would be a +2 and a -3, right? So this is going to factor to x plus 2 times x minus 3 is greater than or equal to 0, okay? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a number line. I bet you're excited. You were like, yes, I was hoping there'd be a number line today. You're welcome, okay? And we want to find where, okay, trying to think of the best way to say it. We want to find where this equals 0, okay? I know we're not talking equal signs right now, but we want to know where, if this were an equation, it would equal 0, okay? And if you're like, why are we doing that? At the end, I'm going to show you why we did it that way, okay? So I'm going to set each of these equal to 0. So I'm going to have x plus 2 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0, okay? I subtract 2 from both sides, get x equals -2, add 3 to both sides, and get x equals positive 3. Okay, so now I know that these two numbers are important when it comes to this problem, okay? So I'm just going to have a 3 and a -2. This is just to kind of give me a visual. It doesn't have to be perfect, okay? Now, I'm going to plot these points on my number line, and it's going to be a closed circle because this is greater than or equal to, okay? If it were just greater than without the equal to, I would do an open circle on these spots, okay? So I'm going to do an open circle on both of these spots, okay? So basically, if I plugged in -2 or -3 to this inequality, I would get 0, right? And 0 is greater than or equal to 0. So we know those are part of our answers, okay? But then we want to know, are all these over here answers, all these over here, or all these guys in the middle? And that is where we do our next step, which is going to be, we're going to test some points and do some sign analysis, okay? So basically I have 3 sections here, right? I have everything less than -2. I have between -2 and 3. And I have all the numbers greater than 3, right? So we want to know which of those 3 are part of my answer, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a point in each section and we're going to plug it in. But we actually only care if it's plus or minus because we are looking at numbers that are greater than or equal to 0, okay? So let me show you what I mean. Let's go ahead. We're going to plug in a number that is less than -2. So let's just plug in -3, okay? But again, I'm not too worried about what the numbers are. I'm just worried about if my answer is going to be positive or negative. And again, let me show you what that means. So if I were to plug in -3, -3 plus 2 would give me a negative number, right? And -3 minus 3 would also give me a negative number. When I multiply those together, I would get a positive number, right? If you want to figure out what the exact number would be, go for it. But I'm only worried about that it's positive, which is greater than or equal to 0, right? So right here, we're positive, okay? Next, let's try a number that's between -2 and 3. Let's try 0 because 0 is usually pretty easy, right? If I were to plug in 0 here, I would get a positive number. If I were to plug it in here, I would get a negative number. And a positive times a negative gives me a negative, okay? So this section in here is negative. Again, if you're like, what are you talking about, lady? I'll show you at the end why this works, okay? All right, and then we need to plug in a number bigger than 3. Let's just do 4, okay? So if I were to plug in 4, 4 plus 2, I would get positive number. 4 minus 3, I would get a positive number. And a positive times a positive is positive. So when I plugged in a 4, which is to the right of the 3, I got a positive answer, right? So we are looking where x is greater than or equal to 0. Well, positive numbers are greater than 0, right? So that means these answers over here are all going to be answers, and these answers over here are also going to be answers, okay? But your teacher may not want a number line as an answer. I mean, they might think it looks pretty cool, but they probably either want your answer in interval notation or just written as inequalities, okay? So if we were writing this as inequalities, I would say x, in order to be greater than or equal to 0, is going to be less than or equal to -2, right? Less than or equal to -2. Or x is going to be greater than or equal to 3. Okay? Would you say that is true? X is less than or equal to -2, greater than or equal to 3. So I can plug in any number over here and it'll work. You'll get an answer that's greater than or equal to 0. Same with over here. I could plug in 100 and I'll get a number that's greater than or equal to 0. Okay? If you wanted to write this in interval notation, we would go from -infinity, and infinity always gets a parenthesis, right? To -2. It can be -2, so we're going to use a bracket. And then we go from 3 to infinity. Infinity always gets a parenthesis. It can be 3, so we use a bracket, and we put a little u here to show that that's a union, that those are together, okay? So I could plug in a number anywhere from -infinity to -2, or from 3 to infinity, and it will make this inequality true, okay? All right, if you're wondering why this works, why this sign analysis thing works, I want you to look at this right here before we factored it, okay? And if I were to graph that, it would be a parabola, right? So I'd need to like switch it around a little bit to figure out exactly what the parabola looked like. But if I were to graph it, my parabola would cross the x-axis at these points, right? At -2 and at 3. That's why we found those points. And then it would go something like this. Pretend like that was perfectly even, okay? It would go something like this. So do you see how from -2 on, it's positive. It's above 0. See that? From -2 to -3, it's negative. From 3 and above, it is positive. So that's why this sign analysis worked. We were just kind of looking at it on one axis versus both the axes. Axes. Whatever you say there. Okay, so hopefully this made sense. If you need some more examples, I will link a playlist for you